In Monday's red and blue political roundup, President Trump is facing strong criticism for his comments following his summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin. In remarks following their one-on-one meeting, Mr. Putin denied trying to interfere in the 2016 presidential election. And that goes against assessments provided by nearly every U.S. intelligence agency. When a reporter asked President Trump who he believed, he said he had great confidence in the intelligence community, but also said Putin was, quote, extremely strong and powerful in denying Russian meddling. Now, those comments by the president set off a chain reaction of criticism from both Republicans and Democratic lawmakers.
I just felt like the president's comments made us look as a nation more like a pushover.
The president stood shoulder to shoulder with the Russian autocrat who ordered intervention in our election and didn't have the courage to confront him and sold out American interests in a shocking betrayal.
The President of the United States sided with Vladimir Putin over the unanimous assessment of the American intelligence community.
What the president said today is not accurate. The intelligence community has assembled probably an unparalleled amount of evidence in regards to the Russian, not just efforts to interfere in 2016, but ongoing efforts to interfere in American society.
For the President of the United States to side with President Putin against American law enforcement, American defense officials, American intelligence agencies is thoughtless, it's dangerous, it's weak. The President is putting himself over our country.
All right, there you have it. Comments from both sides. And joining me now from Washington is Molly Hooper. She is a CBSN political contributor and Capitol Hill reporter for The Hill, and she is ready to talk, I can tell. Molly, first up, I know you're fired up. First up, lots of criticism for the president from lawmakers, again, on both sides of the aisle. What is the general consensus that you are hearing?
Well, I mean, yes, it is on both sides of the aisle, but it's striking the Republican criticism that's coming his way. I mean, we have people like Bob Goodlatte, the House Judiciary Committee chairman, and the House the House International Relations Committee Chairman, Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Ed Royce disagreeing wholeheartedly with what the president said. Dan Sullivan, a senator from Alaska, Republican, said, I disagree with what the president said in this press conference. I mean, who am I going to believe? The patriotic men and women of the intelligence community, including the Director of National Intelligence, or a mafia-like thug who's head of Russia? He says it's not even a close call. He's siding with the Americans, with the intelligence community, and said, we have to keep up our pressure on Russia.
All right, we're also seeing a lot of criticism from Republicans. Are there any who are standing by the president, or is the party united in their condemnation of his remarks?
At this point, I have seen very few, if any, individuals, any Republicans who have backed what the president said. I did happen to catch Rand Paul, I believe it was on CNN, who didn't necessarily denounce what the president articulated in not denouncing the Russia involvement in the U.S. elections. I think that Rand Paul said something to the effect of, hey, it's good to meet. With Russian President Vladimir Putin, we need to get a conversation going. But at the same time, I don't think that he supported what the president said regarding the interference by Russia in U.S. elections.
All right, Senator Chuck Schumer called on Republicans to join him in increasing sanctions on Russia. Are you hearing anything from lawmakers about actions they might take in response? And is there a push for a bipartisan response?
Well, that's where Dan Sullivan's interesting, the Alaskan senator that I mentioned earlier. He actually did end his statement with, we have to keep the pressure up on Russia, for trying to mess with our elections, because they're continuing to do it, and we need to keep these sanctions up. And so we could see some legislation coming out of this. Again, I think that also you're hearing Republicans, or at least the Republicans I've talked to, they're holding off a little bit in terms of what actions they should take moving forward, given that, keep in mind, President Putin, President Trump, they had this 45-minute or so press conference, but at least there were 2 hours before that they spent alone. And Republican senators and even Mark Warner, I spoke to Mark Warner at that event earlier today at the Atlantic Council. He said he wants a debriefing on what happened during those 2 hours, because that will be key in finding out what's really going on here.
And speaking of the press conference, one of the other topics that was brought up was, of course, the special counsel Mueller's investigation. Putin said he would allow Mueller's team to observe interrogations of 12 Russian agents indicted for election meddling. How are lawmakers reacting to this?
Well, they're not saying as much on that. And again, I think it has to do with, wanting to get a debrief from the president's staff on what happened during that 2-hour private meeting. At the same time, I think that they're also waiting to see what will happen with the indictments. Again, today there was another indictment handed down in Washington, D.C. A young woman, I believe she was 29 years old, Russian national, working with, I believe it was a Russian oligarch, dealing with the election interference, and she's in Washington, D.C. So I think we're going to see that play out. Lisa Page, who is the paramour, if you want to call it, of Peter Strzok, the FBI agent who was at the center of that media spectacle up on Capitol Hill last week, she actually underwent her second day of closed-door briefings or debriefing with members of the House Oversight and Judiciary Committee. So they're still taking in information on that. But his criticisms regarding Mueller, lawmakers have not commented so far on. They haven't necessarily backed up his comments, though. That's important.
The president also said the Mueller investigation was to blame for declining relations between the U.S. and Russia. Do you have any sense if lawmakers who have been critical of the investigation might back off their criticisms or perhaps move toward supporting it, especially after Monday's summit?
Well, I don't necessarily think they will move towards supporting it because I believe that, in talking to the Republican lawmakers, the investigation into the Trump organization and the Trump campaign, they believe that it was founded on dubious means. They don't believe that the FISA warrant was based on, on the most accurate and robust of intelligence based on that Steele dossier, which actually President Putin pretty much brushed aside today, saying, I didn't even know who this guy Donald Trump was when he came over here. Why would I look into a guy with pageants, right? In any case, so what's at the heart of the Republican push against the FBI on the Mueller investigation has to do with what it is founded on and how the FBI went about getting that information and actually surveilling members of the campaign. And so I don't think that they will hold off or pull back from that. However, as to whether or not Rod Rosenstein is still in the hot seat, maybe they will pull back a little bit, but I don't think that they will necessarily call it off altogether.
All right, Molly, I know this has been a very busy day for you, and it is far from over, but thank you so much for making time to talk to us. Molly Hooper in Washington.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
It's going to be a busy week.
Yes, it will be. Thank you.